Welcome to this explainer. Okay, look, we've all been there, right? That universal shared trauma of gripping a controller with white knuckles, just staring at your screen in absolute disbelief. You know the exact feeling. You just want to launch that piece of plastic across the room because of a seemingly impossible level. Well, today, we're ranking the absolute most notorious gauntlets in gaming history. Okay, let's dive right into this because, it brings up a question we've probably all yelled at our TVs at 2 in the morning. Why do we actually subject ourselves to games that make us rage quit? Like, why do we do it? As we count down this top 10 list, you're going to see a major recurring theme. These legendary stages, they aren't just testing your basic gaming skills. No, they are testing our absolute unfiltered patience. So, let's kick things off. Coming in at the number 10 spot, we've got the legendary Water Temple from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo 64. And honestly, if you played this back in the day, I bet you literally just felt a cold shiver down your spine. It's just the perfect example of why this place earned its terrible reputation. The whole temple turns into this mind-numbing scavenger hunt of constant backtracking and endless menu management. You're forced to repeatedly raise and lower the water levels across the entire dungeon just to open up new pathways, and it's so incredibly easy to forget the old ones. But here's the real kicker. If you miss just one single solitary key, you are left wandering those exact same identical hallways for hours. It basically takes this grand, sweeping adventure and completely bogs it down in tedious navigation. All right, let's move on to number 9 and add to our list of gaming trauma. We're looking at The Library from Halo Combat Evolved. This Xbox classic is notorious because it totally pulls the rug out from under you. It abruptly shifts from this tense, highly tactical survival mission right into an exhausting, repetitive slog. The crucial thing to understand here is that it's really a test of endurance way more than actual skill. You're suddenly facing these endless, swarming waves of flood enemies, and they just keep pushing through corridors that look completely identical to the ones you literally just cleared. Your ammo drops to precious, practically non-existent levels, combat fatigue sets in, and the sheer length of the level just wears down even the most battle-hardened players. Hitting the number 8 spot, we're taking a trip back to the SNES era with Tubular from Super Mario World. Now, this stage does something incredibly cruel. It takes one of the game's least intuitive power-ups, the P-Balloon, and forces you to rely entirely on its awkward, unfamiliar controls for the whole level. And this brilliantly illustrates how brutal that core mechanic really is. You're floating awkwardly through these incredibly tight spaces where one wrong movement means total disaster. When you're a balloon, you don't control like the Mario you've been playing as for hours. Enemies and hazards are just perfectly, almost maliciously placed to knock you off course, meaning one wrong move instantly sends a totally perfect run spiraling into utter disaster. Number 7 brings us to the NES era, and to a level that permanently ended countless childhood adventures back in the early 90s. Yep, it's the Turbo Tunnel from Battletoads. This stage is basically the historical poster child for a difficulty spike. A sudden, severe jump-in challenge that requires precise memorization rather than just basic reflexes. The stage actually starts off reasonably enough. It lulls you in, making you think, hey, I've got this handled. Then, bam, it suddenly accelerates into this absolute blur of stone walls and obstacles. Basic reflexes? Yep, go ahead and toss those right out the window. Surviving this hoverbike nightmare demands split-second, perfectly memorized reactions. You don't just react to the obstacle, you literally have to know it's there before it even pops up on the screen. Moving on to number 6, we have a level that literally tells you exactly what's expected right in its title. The Perfect Run from Super Mario Galaxy 2 on the Nintendo Wii. This incredibly intimidating stage is completely locked away until you've completed nearly everything else the game has to offer. And the rules here are just incredibly brutal. 0 checkpoints, 1 hit means immediate failure. The platforming is already super difficult for sure, and the enemies are dangerous, but the real soul-crushing challenge isn't just mastering a single tough sequence. No, it's maintaining flawless, perfect execution for the entire lengthy duration of the stage. One tiny slip-up right at the finish line, and you are sent all the way back to the very start. At number 5, the stakes of the 16-bit era are instantly raised. Welcome to the Death Egg Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Sega Genesis. Just imagine the narrative here for a second. You finally fought your way through the previous stage to reach the grand finale. You're expecting a really tough challenge, sure, but you also expect your trusty safety net. But instead, you get a harsh reality check. No protective rings are available, and you have to fight two incredibly difficult bosses back to back. Since rings are Sonic's only real protection from damage, every single mistake now carries serious, immediate, run-ending consequences. Talk about pressure. Breaking into our top four, we have Ornstein and Smog from Dark Souls. Honestly, if you want to pinpoint the exact moment this game truly earns its fearsome legendary reputation, this is undoubtedly it. In this fight, you are forced to manage two massive, totally contrasting threats simultaneously. You've got Ornstein with his lightning-fast aggression keeping you constantly on the defensive, paired up with Smog, who is just delivering these crushing, run-ending blows. The strategy requires such immense patience. You have to constantly maneuver just to separate these two for a split-second opening, and then you still have to survive the second phase. It is a battle of attrition that famously trapped countless players for actual, literal days. Number 3 brings us back to the original PlayStation and the high road from Crash Bandicoot. Picture this, a narrow, rickety rope bridge suspended high over a massive canyon, completely shrouded in fog. You're dealing with tiny pathways, moving hazards, and unforgiving jumps that are made infinitely worse by some really awkward camera angles. You can absolutely breeze through the rest of the game, hit this exact bridge, and suddenly find yourself stuck for hours. Every time you fall, you lose significant progress, forcing you to repeat the same terrifying tightrope walk over and over again until your depth perception just completely gives out. Just missing the top spot at number 2 is one of gaming's earliest and arguably most notorious rage-inducing challenges, the Dam from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the NES. Sluggish controls, electric seaweed, a ruthless underwater timer. Just hearing those words is honestly enough to trigger collective trauma for an entire generation of gamers. The game suddenly just abandons its standard action combat for this high-stress underwater bomb defusal mission, where the controls fight you just as much as that glowing pink seaweed does. And let's be real here, a massive chunk of us simply never survived this level to see what the rest of the game even looked like. Section Honorable Mentions, the almost infamous. Let's rapidly fire through some runners-up before we reveal the number 1 spot. We've got the unforgiving, time-crunched precision required for the Mile High Club in Call of Duty 4 on veteran difficulty. Then there's the relentless, chaotic projectiles and tiny margin for error in Cuphead's Devil's Playhouse. We can't forget the brutal resource management of Zelda's Trial of the Sword in Master Mode, or the checkpoint-free, advanced mechanic gauntlet of Champions Road in Mario 3D World. Oh, and finally, Sonic 3's Carnival Night Zone, remembered largely because millions of kids spent hours trapped by a simple barrel puzzle the game just never ever clearly explained how to solve. And now, the ultimate culmination of gaming mastery. Coming in at number 1, the absolute most frustrating level of all time, the Path of Pain from Hollow Knight. This hidden challenge strips away combat almost entirely to focus purely on absolute platforming mastery. You must perfectly chain together these exhausting, relentless sequences of wall jumps, precise dashes, pogo attacks, and razor-thin maneuvers. And with incredibly sparse checkpoints, a single mistake wipes out agonizingly slow progress in literally seconds. It demands absolute, flawless mastery of Hollow Knight's movement mechanics and an extraordinary, almost superhuman level of patience. As the ultimate platforming trial, it truly, truly earns the name Path of Pain. Which really brings us to one final question. Is all that crushing frustration actually worth the incredible high of eventual victory? Like, why do we willingly push ourselves through these legendary gauntlets? Honestly, it's because that feeling of finally conquering the impossible, of mastering a system that demanded absolute perfection from you, is entirely unmatched. So, what was your ultimate gaming trial? Think about it. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.